Hello, and welcome to Peter Presents Iliad, episode 21, where we're going over book 21. Now, before we get started into the real intro, I want to say I'm sorry. I forgot last week to feature the special mug that I was drinking from. In this case, it's got a nice little boat on it and has a little bit of flavor text on the back. This week, I'm going to be drinking from this special Mandarin Duck tea mug, so I hope you have something nice to drink with you. Now, when I posted this episode on Facebook, I told people that this was the last time they could really jump into this story if they were coming in late and still kind of get what was going on. So, here's a short recap. The Trojan War has been going on for 9 years. Achilles, the greatest warrior in the world, fighting for the Greeks, has been staying out of the fight. Hector, the head of the Trojan forces, who was the son of King Priam of Troy, has been beating back the Greeks. Achilles' best friend, Patroclus, came out in Achilles' armor to fight Hector, and Hector defeated him. So now Achilles has joined the fight outside the walls of Troy, out on the plains, and he has been killing and killing and killing all the Trojans that he can possibly get his hands on with his spear or his sword, or that he can just huck a rock at. So that's where we're at. We're in the midst of the rage of Achilles, and Zeus has unleashed the gods from Olympus who are taking up sides for the Greeks and the Trojans. So as the Greeks and the Trojans fight, so are the gods. You've got Athena, you've got Poseidon, you've got Hera, you've got Hephaestus, you've got all of them there except for Hades. Hades, who remains in his domain of the underworld, and Zeus, who is sitting on a mountain watching this all unfold. So with that intro out of the way, let us begin Iliad, Book 21 by Homer. When they came to the ford of the Xanthus, the eddying river that Zeus begot, Achilles split the Trojans. Half he chased toward the city across the plain, where yesterday the Greeks had fled from Hector's shining rage. Hera, to slow this stampede of Trojans, spread a curtain of fog before them. The others swerved and found themselves herded into the river. They crashed down into the deep, silver water as it tumbled and roared through its banks. You could hear their screams as they floundered and were whirled around in the eddies. Fire will sometimes cause a swarm of locusts to rise in the air and fly to a river. The fire keeps coming, burning them instantly, and the insects shrink down into the water. Just so Achilles. And Xanthus' noisy channel was clogged with chariots, horses, and men. Achilles wasted no time, leaving his spear propped against a tamarisk and holding only his sword. He leapt from the bank like a spirit from hell, bent on slaughter. He struck over and over in a widening spiral. Hideous groans rose from the wounded, and the river water turned crimson with blood. Fish, fleeing a dolphin's huge maw, hide by the hundreds in the harbor's crannies, but the dolphin devours whatever it catches. Likewise, the Trojans beneath the river banks. When Achilles' hands were sore from killing, he culled 12 boys live from the river to pay for the blood of dead Patroclus. They were dazed as fawns when he led them out, their hands bound behind them with the leather belts they had been wearing around their corded tunics. Achilles' men led them back to the ships, and Achilles returned to his killing frenzy. On the way back, he met a son of Priam, Lycaon by name, running from the river. This boy Achilles had captured once before in his father's orchard, where he had come one night to cut fig saplings for chariot rails, but found Achilles' iron mask in his face. That time Achilles sold him for a good price to Jason's son on Lemnos, where he had shipped him. A family friend, Aetion of Imbros, had ransomed him for even more money and sent him to Arisbe. From there he managed to make his way home. For 11 days he celebrated with his friends his escape from Lemnos. On the 12th day Zeus gave him back to Achilles, who would send him now off again against his will, this time to Hades. He was all but naked when Achilles noticed him, having discarded his helmet, spear, and shield because they made him sweat as he clambered up from the river and his knees were giving out. Achilles was indignant and said to himself, "What's this I see? The Trojan princes I've killed are going to start rising from the moldering gloom, judging from how this one has escaped his fate after being shipped off to Lemnos and sold. All that gray sea couldn't keep him back. Let's give him a taste of my spearhead and see whether he comes back from that or stays put in the teeming earth." And he waited. Lycaon approached in a daze, intent on grasping his knees. All he wanted was to wriggle away from death and black fate. All Achilles wanted was to run him through. His spear flashed out, but Lycaon stooped and touched his knees, ducked under it. The spear passed over his back and stuck in the earth, quivering with desire for a man's flesh. Lycaon caught Achilles' knees with one hand and held the pointed spear with the other, and would not let go of eager as he begged, "I am at your knees, Achilles. Pity me. You have to respect me as your suppliant, for I tasted Demeter's holy grain with you on that day you took me captive in the orchard and sent me far from my father and friends, sold into sacred Lemnos for 100 oxen. I ransomed myself for 3 times that. This morning was my 12th since getting back to Ilion after many hard turns, and now fate has put me in your hands again. Father Zeus must hate me to give me to you twice. My mother bore me for a shortened life, Laothoe, old Altes' daughter, Altes, lord of the Leleges, whose stronghold is steep Pedasus on the Satni Oasis. Priam had his daughter as one of his wives, and we're her 2 sons, and you'll butcher us both. Godlike Polydorus you've already killed, got him with your spear as he led the charge. And now this is it for me. I doubt I can escape, since it was some god who put me in your hands, but I'll say this too, and you can think it over. Don't kill me, since I'm not from the same womb as Hector, who killed your gentle, valiant friend." Priam's glorious son spoke words of entreaty, but heard a voice without a trace of softness say, "Shut up, fool, and stop talking ransom. Before Patroclus met his destiny, it was more to my taste to spare Trojan lives, capture them and sell them overseas. But now they all die, every last Trojan God puts into my hands before Ilion's walls, all of them, and especially Priam's children. You die too, friend. Don't take it hard. Patroclus died, and he was far better than you. Take a look at me. Do you see how huge I am, how beautiful? I have a noble father. My mother was a goddess, but I too am in death's shadow. There will come a time, some dawn or evening or noon in this war, when someone will take my life from me with a spear thrust or an arrow from a string." He spoke. Lycoon's knees and heart went slack. He let go the spear and sat there, both hands outstretched. Achilles drew his honed sword and struck near the collarbone. The whole blade sank into his trunk, and he fell prone to the ground, black blood trickling out and wetting the dirt. Achilles slung him into the river by his foot and crowed over him as the current bore him off. "Lie there with the fish. They will lick the blood from your wound, your cold funeral rites. Your mother will not lay you on a bier and lament. No, eddying Scamander will roll you out to sea, and fish will dart up under the black ripples and nibble at Lycoon's shining fat. All of the Trojans will die like that, die all the way back to Troy's sacred town as I whittle you down from behind. Your river won't help you with his silver eddies, the water you've sanctified no doubt with bulls and with live horses thrown into his pools. No, you'll all die ugly deaths until you have paid for the Greeks' loss, for Patroclus dead, killed by the ships while I was away." As he spoke, the river roiled in wrath and pondered how to foil Achilles' efforts and save the Trojans from this pestilence. Meanwhile, Achilles attacked Asteropaeus, son of Pelagon, who was born of a river, the wide Axius, who lay in Periobea, eldest of the daughters of Acaseminus. As Achilles charged him, Asteropaeus, carrying 2 spears, stepped from the river to face him, his courage coming from Xanthus, who was angry because of all the young men cut down in his stream by Achilles. When they were within range of each other, the shining sprinter addressed Asteropaeus. "Who are you, with the nerve to face me, and where are you from? It's your parents' loss." Pelagon, glorious son, answered him. "Why ask about my lineage, son of Peleus? I come from Paeonian soil, a distant land, and I led its spearmen here to Ilion 11 days ago. My lineage is from wide-flowing Axius, whose river water flows loveliest on the face of the earth. Pelagon was his son and my father, men say. Now let's do battle, glorious Achilles." It was a threat, and as Achilles raised high his spear of Pelian ash, Asteropaeus, who was ambidextrous, hurled both his spears. One hit Achilles' shield, but did not penetrate, stopped by the layer of god-given gold. The other spear grazed his right forearm, drawing a welt of black blood and sailing on until it punched into earth unsatisfied. Then it was Achilles' turn, and he rifled his shaft at Asteropaeus with murderous aim, but missed the man, the ashen spear boring into the bank up to half its length. Drawing his sharp sword from beside his thigh, the son of Peleus made a furious leap, and in the space of that leap, Asteropaeus tried once, twice, 3 times to pull Achilles' spear from the bank, but only got it to quiver. The 4th time he tried desperately to break the shaft, but Achilles got to him first with a quick slash across his belly. His guts oozed out, and he went down gasping in darkness. Achilles jumped on his chest, and as he ripped off his armor, his boasts rang out. "Lie there like that, sons of Zeus Almighty are too tough for even a river's offspring. You say you were born from a wide-flowing river, but I boast that I am descended from Zeus. My father rules the Myrmidons, Peleus, son of Aeacus, and Aeacus came from Zeus. And just as Zeus is stronger than any river, Zeus's sons are stronger than any river's sons. There's a great river beside you right now, if he can help, but no one fights Zeus, not even the great Achilles, not even ocean, from whose deeps every river and sea, every spring and well flows. Even he fears the lightning of Zeus and his crackling thunder." He pulled his bronze spear from the bank and left Astyopius lying in the sand, quite dead. The dark water lapped at his body, and the eels and fish went to work on him, nibbling at the fat around his kidneys. Achilles' next move was to go after Paeonian charioteers along the river. They were in shock at what they had just seen. Their best man and leader utterly destroyed by one strong swipe of Achilles' sword. He killed them easily. Thersilochus, Mydon, Astapelus, Menesis, Thracius, Aeneas, Aphelestes, and with his blinding speed he would have killed more had not the river, assuming human semblance, called to Achilles in a voice that came deep from his eddies. Achilles, you are stronger and do more harm than any man, for the very gods assist you. If Zeus has allowed you to kill all the Trojans, at least drive them from me, and do it on the plain. My beautiful streams are clogged with dead men. I can no longer pour my waters into the sea, choked with corpses, while you blindly go on killing. Let it be. I am stunned, O warlord. And Achilles, the great sprinter, as you wish, sky-bred Scamander, but I will not stop killing these insolent Trojans until I have penned them all inside their city and taken on Hector. It's him or me now. And he leapt on the Trojans like a god. Then the swirling river spoke to Apollo. Silverbow, child of Zeus, you have not kept his stern commandment to stand by the Trojans and aid them until the evening comes on and shadows darken the planet's deep soil. He spoke, and Achilles took a flying leap off the bank and came down in midstream. The river rushed up him in full spate, and with all the force of its currents swept along the bodies of Achilles' many victims and washed them ashore, roaring like a bull. At the same time he sheltered the living in deep pools where his water flowed smooth. Around Achilles the wall of water arched high and pushed against his shield. He lost his footing and grasped at an elm, a tall, stately tree, but it fell uprooted and tearing away the bank, crashing with its thick branches into the water, bridging the river's width. Achilles jumped out and, afraid now, began to sprint across the plain, but the great god wouldn't stop, chasing him with a black crest, determined to stop the shining sprinter and save Troy from ruin. Achilles got about a spear cast ahead, swooping like a black eagle, the great raptor that is strongest and swiftest of all winged things, the bronze plate clanging on his chest as he leaned into his stride to escape the river that followed him with a tremendous roar. A farmer has dug an irrigation ditch to lead the water from a dark spring into his garden plots. Now, hoe in hand, he is knocking out the dams from the channel, and the water sweeps all the pebbles along the bottom as it sluices down, and the man leading the water is left behind. So the river kept overtaking Achilles, fast as he was. Gods are stronger than men. Whenever Achilles tried to make a stand and put up a fight, and see if perhaps all the gods in heaven weren't pursuing him, the sky-swollen river would pound on his shoulders, and Achilles would jump. His morale was sinking. The strong current was wearing his knees out and cutting the ground from under his feet. With a look at the sky, the son of Peleus cried out in distress, "Father Zeus, not a single god is stepping in to save me from the river, pitiful as I am. If I escape this, I don't mind dying later. I blame my mother more than any deity with her lullabies that I would meet my death under Ilion's walls, shot by Apollo. Better to be killed by Hector, Troy's best, one good man killed by another. As it is, I am doomed to a wretched death, caught in this river like a swineherd boy swept away while crossing a winter torrent." Then Poseidon and Athena were with him in human form, clasping his hands and pledging support. Poseidon saying, "Fear not, son of Peleus, nor be afraid. 2 gods are with you, with Zeus's consent, Pallas Athena and I. It is not your doom to be vanquished by a river. He will soon relent, as you will see yourself. We have good counsel for you to accept. Do not cease from war until you have driven all the Trojans who escape from your hands within Ilion's walls. When you have killed Hector, return to the ships. We grant you this glory. And they were off to the company of spirits, while Achilles, aroused by the god's command, turned toward the plain. It was all flooded now, awash with splendid gear and the floating corpses of slain young men. Achilles sprinted hard straight into the current, and the wide river could not hold him back. Athena's strength was in him, but Scamander was still in spate, and raged even more strongly against Peleus' son. Lifting his waters into an arching wave, he surged to a crest and called to Simois, "Join with me, brother, to hold in check this human strength, or he will soon storm Priam's great city. The Trojans can't stop him. Help me beat him back now. Fill your currents with water from your springs. Rouse your torrents. Raise a great wave and make it churn and rumble with logs and stones so we can stop this wild man who thinks he can fight on par with the gods. His strength will not help him, nor his beauty, nor his splendid armor, which will lie deep in slime. And I will shroud his body in tons and tons of pebbly sand, nor shall the Achaeans know where to find his bones. So deep the silt I will bury him in. This will be his monument. No need to heap a mound for his funeral." And he arched high over Achilles, boiling and seething with foam, blood, and corpses, the livid surge of the sky-swollen river cresting and poised to overwhelm Peleus' son. Hera shrieked, terrified that the great river would sweep Achilles away in its current. She called to her son, Hephaestus, and said, "Let's go, clubfoot. We thought that you were matched up with Xanthus. Hurry up and show your fire here. I'll rouse out onshore winds from the west and south to drive your flames over the Trojan dead and burn them and their gear to a crisp. You burn the trees around Xanthus' banks and surround him with fire. Don't back off no matter how he whines or threatens. Keep the pressure on until you hear me shout." So Hephaestus kindled his fire, and it swept across the plain, burning the dead, the many corpses left by Achilles, and evaporating the glittering water. Late in the summer, the north wind dries out a freshly watered orchard, and the man who tills the orchard is glad. The plain was parched, and the dead consumed. Then the fire moved toward the river. The elms, the willows, and the tamarisks burned. The lotus, the rushes, and the galingale that grew lush on the beautiful riverbanks burned. The eels and the fish in the eddying pools, tortured by the heat Hephaestus concocted, plunged and darted through the glassy currents. The river itself burned and pleaded with the god, "Hephaestus, no god can oppose you, and I will not fight you in your blaze of fire. Stop! As for the Trojans, let bright Achilles drive them from Ilion. I will not help or hinder." And as he spoke, his water seethed as if in a cauldron set on fire, stoked with kindling, boiling to melt rich hog fat, and bubbling over. The river burned, and his water boiled, impossible for it to flow any further in the tormenting blast of Hephaestus' heat. Then his words rose up on wings to Hera. "Hera, why has your son singled me out for punishment? I am not so guilty in your eyes as Troy's other allies, but I will stop if you order me to. Make him stop too, and I will swear not to ward off Ilion's doom on that day when Troy goes up in flames, burned by the warlike youth of Greece." Ivory-armed Hera heard his plea and spoke to her darling son Hephaestus. "Hephaestus, My glory, hold back. It is not right to attack an immortal for the sake of a mortal. So Hephaestus quenched his fire, and the river Xanthus flowed again, but its fury was quelled. Hera, though angry herself, had calmed these two. The other gods, though, were at each other's throats, clashing like contrary winds. At the force of their collision, the earth clanged like a cymbal, and the sky blared like a trumpet. Zeus, sitting on Olympus, took it all in and laughed with delight at the spectacle of the gods closing with each other in combat. Ares began with an assault on Athena, landing in front of her with a bronze spear. "What are you doing now, dogfly? Setting the gods against each other whatever way your high spirits dictate? Remember when you goaded on Diomedes to wound me, with everyone watching, you guided the spear into my noble flesh. You'll pay the price now for what you did then." And he stabbed at her tasseled aegis, which not even Zeus's lightning can pierce. Athena backpedaled from his bloody snout and scooped up a jagged piece of black granite that lay on the plain, a huge boundary stone from days gone by. It flew from her sculpted hand and caught Ares on the neck. His knees buckled and he went down, covering a good acre or two, hair grimed with dust, armor clattering around him. Athena broke into a laugh and crowed, "You simpleton! You still haven't learned that I'm too strong for you, or you wouldn't try to match up with me. Maybe this is what your mother wanted when she cursed you for abandoning the Greeks and giving aid and comfort to the Trojans." And while she turned her luminous eyes away, Aphrodite came up and led him off by the hand, groaning heavily. He was barely conscious. Ivory-armed Hera took notice of this, and her words took wing to Pallas Athena. "Mystic daughter of Zeus, that bloated tick is leading Ares out of battle. Get on her!" Athena was only too glad to comply, charging Aphrodite and punching her in the breast with her clenched fist. Aphrodite collapsed in a heap, taking Ares down with her. The two of them lay on the teeming sod, and Athena's boast flew up to the sky. "May everyone who fights for Troy against the Greeks wind up like this, and may they all be as brave as Aphrodite was when she helped Ares and confronted me. We would have ended this war a long time ago and destroyed Ilion's foundation stone." This brought a smile to Hera's lips. Then Lord Poseidon spoke to Apollo. "Phoebus, why are we two holding back? It's not fitting. All the others have started. More shame on us if we return to Olympus and cross Zeus's bronze threshold without fighting. You start. Since you're younger, it wouldn't be proper for me since I'm older and no more. Has your mind gone soft? Don't you remember the suffering we two alone of all the gods endured at Ilion, that time we came here from Zeus's side and served proud Laomedon for a year at fixed wages? He was our boss, and I built for the Trojans their city wall, wide and beautiful, to make Ilion invulnerable. And you, Phoebus, herded their cattle in the wooded foothills of ridged Mount Ida. But when the year was up and the time came for us to be paid, Laomedon outrageously robbed us of our wages, threatening to blind us hand and foot and sell us off to distant islands and lop off our ears. So back we went, angry and disgruntled over the wages he promised but did not pay. It is with his people you are favoring now, when you should instead be working with us for the utter destruction of these insolent Trojans, together with their children and blushing wives." And Apollo, lord of the distances, "Earthshaker, you would call me imprudent if I fought with you for the sake of mortals, pitiful creatures who, like leaves on a tree, flame briefly to life, eat the fruit of the fields, then wither and die. No, we should desist immediately and let them fight on their own." And Apollo withdrew, too well bred to slug it out with his paternal uncle. But his hell-cat sister Artemis, queen of wild things, reviled him mercilessly. "Running away, Apollo? What a collapse! Poseidon can claim an easy victory now. That bow you carry is as worthless as wind. Don't let me catch you bragging again, as you always used to in our father's house, that you would take on Poseidon in open combat." Apollo turned away without a word, but Zeus's august wife was furious with her. "Do you think you can cross me like this, you bitch? I'm not an easy opponent for the likes of you, even if you do carry a bow, Zeus's little lioness, with license to kill whatever woman you please. You'd do better to hunt wild game, deer in the woods, than tangle with your betters. But if you want a taste of war, you might as well find out how undermatched you are against me." She seized her wrists with her left hand and ripped the bow from her shoulders with her right, and with a smile on her face used these weapons to beat her about the ears as she twisted and squirmed, spilling the arrows out of her quiver. She finally got away and fled from Hera, weeping as a dove flies from a falcon into a cleft in the rock, leaving her bow and arrows on the ground. At this, Hermes turned to Leto and said, "I'll tell you what, Leto. I won't fight with you. Zeus's wives are pretty tough customers. You have my permission to boast openly that you have beaten the daylights out of me." Thus, Hermes and Leto gathered up her daughter's curved bow and arrows from the swirling dust and then withdrew. Artemis crossed Zeus's bronze threshold and sat down sobbing on her father's lap, her fragrant robe fluttering. He held her tight and, laughing pleasantly, asked her, "Which god has done this to you, child? Outrageous! Is not as if you would misbehave." And the huntress, ribbons in her hair, "Your wife Hera beat me up, father. She's always causing trouble among the gods." And while they talked in heaven, Phoebus Apollo entered sacred Ilion, afraid that the Greeks would breach its wall and exceed their destiny that very day. The other immortals went to Olympus, some of them angry and some jubilant, and they sat down around their father, the dark cloud. Meanwhile, Achilles was still killing the Trojans, both men and horses. When a city burns, the smoke rises to the wide heavens, and the god's wrath fans the fire and drives it on. Everyone suffers, many grievously. Such was the suffering Achilles caused the Trojans. Old Priam stood on Troy's sacred wall. He saw Achilles as a prodigious force before whom the Trojans were being driven helplessly. Groaning, he climbed down to the ground and called to the gatekeepers along the wall, "Hold the gates wide open until the army can run inside the city. Achilles is here, driving them on, and I fear the worst. When they are all inside and can rest, close the double doors tight. I dread the thought of that monster leaping inside the wall." He spoke. They thrust back the bars, and light poured from the gates. Apollo leapt out to keep Achilles from Troy. The Trojans were streaming toward the city's high walls, parched with thirst and white with dust from the plain, with Achilles at their backs with his spear, maniacal in his rage and lust for glory. The Greeks would have taken Troy right then had not Apollo lifted Antenor's son, Agenor, to one bright, peerless moment. He put into his heart the fortitude to defend himself from death's heavy hands, then stood nearby, leaning on the oak tree and enfolded in mist. So when Agenor caught sight of Achilles, sacker of cities, he halted. His heart brooded darkly, and with a sense of great oppression, he said, "Now I'm in for it. If I run from Achilles the way the others are, like panicked animals, he'll catch me anyway and butcher me like a lamb. But what if I let these others go? Let them be driven by Achilles and run myself away from the wall toward the Ilion plain until I reach the foothills of Ida and hide out in the thickets. Toward evening I could bathe in the river, cool off, and maybe make it back to Troy. Why am I talking to myself like this? It's all over if he spots me turning off away from the city and toward the plain. He'll chase me down with his great speed, and then there'll be no way to escape from death, since he is far stronger than any man alive. Then why not face him in front of the city? His skin is not impervious to bronze, and he only has one life in him. Everyone says he is human. It's just that Zeus, son of Cronos, gives him glory. And he crouched to await Achilles' onset, heart pumping, ready for battle. A leopard steps out from the deep bush in full sight of a hunter, completely unafraid. Even if she hears the hounds baying, she will not turn tail and run, and even if the human is lucky enough to strike first and hit her with his spear, she will not give up, but will fight on with the spear in her body until she is killed or gets her claws in him. So too Agenor, Lord Antenor's son, would not give up until he had tested Achilles. He poised his balanced shield before him, took aim at Achilles, and shouted, "I'll bet you hope to capture Troy today, don't you, Achilles the Splendid? You fool! There's still a lot of sorrow to be endured for her sake, and within her our many brave men standing before our parents, our wives, and our sons, and protecting Ilion. No, it is you who will meet your doom today. I don't care how great a warrior you are." And the javelin flew from his heavy hand, hitting Achilles' shin just beneath the knee. The newly forged tin greave clanged loudly, and the bronze spear point ricocheted off the armor that the god had given him. It was Achilles' turn to charge Agenor, but Apollo denied him victory, snatching Agenor off in a curtain of mist and escorting him softly out of battle. Then, with a ruse, Apollo got the son of Peleus away from the Trojan army, likening himself to Agenor in every detail. He stood just before Achilles, who gave chase, pursuing him across the plain, then turning him along the banks of the swirling Scamander. All the while, Apollo, beguiling him, stayed just out of reach, and Achilles, with his foot speed, thought he would catch him. This bought time for the panicked Trojans to swarm gratefully into the city. They no longer had the will to wait for each other outside the city walls to see who had made it and who had died in battle. Everyone whose legs could carry him stampeded in. And that is book 21. Man, goodness, Achilles is angry. But then again, I believe that's more or less the whole point of this book. More death, more killing, more tragedies. How cold-blooded has Achilles gotten? We see that he has taken people captive before and ransomed them back. And he even finds someone who he met before that, who he had taken captive, one of Priam's other sons. And in cold blood, he just kills him. The guy is at his feet, grasping his knees, being like, just don't kill me. Don't kill me. You didn't kill me last time. Just let me go, man. I just got back home. And Achilles looks him in the face and kills him. Achilles fights a river god. Now, some people have interpreted the river as the tears of the loved ones of the people who Achilles has killed. He's caused a lot of pain and suffering, and now that pain and suffering that he's grappling with Patroclus is now having him fight the pain and suffering of other people. Imagine this wave coming up, and it's glassy water but with blood mixed in and dead bodies and bronze and spears and shields going through it. Can you imagine that image? What an incredible, harrowing sight. All the death and destruction he's caused being carried by the tears of the people that love the ones he has killed. Then what are the gods and goddesses doing? They're acting more like mortals than ever. This story, this war that started as a petty dispute, depending on where you decide the whole thing started, has reached up to heaven and started to hurt the gods. The children of the gods are being killed in this war, and now the gods have come down to earth from Mount Olympus to fight each other. And Poseidon's talking to Apollo about a job they had and wages and how they weren't paid, and it's like, why does a god care about that? And the reason why is because they're just devolving. This war is bringing the worst out of all of them, including Achilles, whose rage, as Homer said at the very beginning of this book, cost the Greeks incalculable pain. And that includes himself. If Achilles definitely blames himself for Patroclus's death. He earlier he's projecting, he's like, oh well, the gods did this, and Agamemnon and I both had issues, as opposed to, this is kind of my fault. I let him go out, I gave him the tools, I gave him my armor to fight for me. Of course he was gonna die. And it's just more destruction. Now here we see also rivers, they're a force of nature, and Achilles, who has denied food in mourning for Patroclus, is giving up on life itself. Now he's fighting nature itself. He's fighting against the natural order of things, literal elements. All right, he's fighting the gods, and some of the gods are on his side. And then also, personally, to get away from Achilles for a second, we've heard about how Athena and Hera just hate Aphrodite, and I just think it's so funny that this might be the oldest boob punch in literary history. So that's what you get out of this reading today. Most of this war is pretty realistic. Okay, the gods come in and they help people hit or miss and all that. But now we've got Ares, who is an acre or two long, falling, and the river and the fire and the steam and the blood and the noise, and they're the earth exclaimed like a cymbal and the sky like a trumpet. It's all going bananas. And then here's the other thing, though, that's still happening. You've got an entire river that's clogged with dead bodies. Nature is being stopped by the death that is being caused by Achilles. And all these horrible things are happening to these people. And then when the gods kind of beat each other up, Artemis, who I always kind of thought was pretty tough and cool, she's outside all the time and all that, she gets batted around the ears by Hera, and then goes and whines to her dad, she hit me. It's yeah, you're not dead though, are you? It's how many dead people do you have to be surrounded by before you stop thinking about yourself, Artemis? And the rest of them, they're haha, I did pretty well, or oh man, I got beat up. I think the moment with Hermes and Leto is great, where he's just tell you what, you tell everybody you beat me up, let's go. It's cool to see humor like that. That's that old. It's oh yeah, that's pretty funny. He's well, Zeus's wives are tough customers, and it's you could imagine that line there, the men in the audience being mm-hmm, or the women in the audience being yes, whatever, for that. Also, once again, Athena, goddess of war, Ares, god of war, they fight, and she just destroys him. One hit, throws a rock at him right in the neck. Two gods of war fight. Athena, number one, because she's not only the goddess of war, she is also the goddess of strategic warfare, wisdom, and handicraft. So we go with that. This time we also got a nice metaphor from Homer, not of a lion, but of a leopard. So he's changing it up after 50 lion things. Um, and then we've got Apollo, of course, being all chicken here. He's like, oh, yes, I could totally kill that old brute Poseidon. And then Poseidon's like, come on, why don't we get started? He's like, oh, no, it's improper, no, I say. And goes off. And then Artemis is like, you said this. And, of course, that, well, you know what happened. But, yeah, so the Trojans make it back inside Troy. All right, because Apollo draws off Achilles. I'm sweating like crazy in here, by the way. I took the jacket off and everything, but I'm just like, into it, and I keep the AC off while I do this so the sound isn't messed up, so I want you to appreciate the suffering I'm going through for y'all. So yeah, that's it for that one. Now, that was book 21. Next time is book 22, obviously. And then that's going to be Thursday, and next week is our last week going through this book. I might do an epilogue episode about it to kind of be like, here's what happened later on with some of these characters, but we're getting close to the end here. And before I go into the chat, I just want to say, like, it's been hitting me recently. Like, I mean, I've always... I thought this was cool from the beginning because this is my favorite book, and I can't believe I got permission to do this from the translator and the publishing company and all that, but realizing, like, man, I basically read an entire, like, I've read this whole thing aloud and went through and told everybody everything I think about it up to this point. That's kind of, it's kind of been hitting me more, like, how cool that is to me. So I'm trying to think of a next book to go through, but let's go on to the chat. So Joe's back. He says, yeah, all cut up from Thursday. Let's go let's go Achilles, LOL, he says. Allie says, hooray. Bubba the musician says, here. And Goram Darth Cal says, his name is Achilles and he kills with ease. Coincidence? I think not. Perhaps. Bubba the musician says, Zeus is such a drama queen. I know. Oh my gosh. Zeus says, haha, nice one. Joe also says, I'd love to see hockey players have such eloquent conversations before they fight. Could you imagine that? Like, well, the closest I think I've seen is the Mighty Duck trilogy, which I've been meaning to revisit for a while, but much like the BBC's Narnia series, maybe I should just remember it the way that I do instead of be unhappily given the reality of those productions. But anyhow, Bubba the musician says, like River Spirit in the Battle of Baruna, Narnia. Yes, so I was just talking about Narnia. So there's a scene in one of the Narnia books, and actually one of the Narnia movies, that involves a river spirit. Yes, and C.S. Lewis would have been familiar with this book. Very much so. And it's possible, and actually, C.S. Lewis, of course, was inspired greatly by Greek mythology for his Narnia series. That's where he gets fauns and satyrs and centaurs and so on. So dryads and naiads and all the rest of them. But he also has a big old river spirit who talks and does some cool stuff in the book. Joe says, damn, now even the gods are battling. The gods used to have jobs. The river was like a character itself, and Achilles should have had a Snickers before joining the battle. I agree, Joe. Well put indeed. All the wars that could be avoided if only they were sponsored by Snickers. This show, however, as you may know, is not sponsored by Snickers. So Snickers, if you're watching this, hit me up. Darth Cal ends off with a laugh of appreciation for Joe's snicker joke. You might say he's snickering. Haha, kill me. But with that, I think we are just about done for this evening. So after this... Geez, we're almost done, guys, and I want to keep reading this book forever. I've already decided at some point in my life I'm going to do this again. Maybe not live, maybe as, like, more produced videos. I'm set on adapting Iliad in some way for the screen, whether it's whether it's like a literal like Greek version, or if it's, with a World War One aesthetic to it. I haven't decided yet, but I'm definitely I really want to do this now, and I want to keep do. I just want to keep doing this book. It's so good, but all good things must come to an end, and anyhow, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, episode 21, and I really hope that you'll join me for episode 22 this Thursday at 7:30 Eastern Daylight Time. I hope you've enjoyed your drink, and the following week we are going to finish this book. So, thanks to all y'all who have been through and watched all these things. I'm amazed that there was any type of... I really thought when I started this that I'd get to the point where I was doing books where no one was watching, and I'd have them up there, and it'd be for me, and it'd be something that I could say, like, I did that. But I'm really pleased that, a bunch of you are here, like, every week. So thank you for that. It's really greatly cheered me up. And I hope to see it through to the end with you. And if you're not watching this live, you're almost there at the end. And if you aren't watching this live, leave me a comment, and tell me exactly what you're doing here. So, all right, thanks a lot, everybody. Have a wonderful night.